And now, it's Boomer Life. Lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Money, 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 must be funny in the rich man's world.
Money, money, money. Good evening and welcome to Boomer Life here on CISL 650. I'm Stirling Faux. A little musical push there from ABBA and our producer Dwayne Bishop to get things going on this program, in which we're going to talk about solutions to debt. Some solutions that you're going to hear about you may not even be aware of. Joining us in studio today, a couple of guests from Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy, including President George Abakhan. Nice to see you again, George.
Glad to be on.
And also with us, and I did not know this until quite recently, now Vice President of Abakhan and Associates, Brett Luckin is back with us as well. Hi, Brett.
Thank you very much. Yes, hello.
Now, George, tell us a little bit about Abakhan and Associates. The firm has been here in British Columbia for how many years now?
As Abakhan and Associates since 1999, I guess, 1998, after I retired from Deloitte & Touche, and gradually it just grew until now we have 30 people and 5 vice presidents or 4 vice presidents and the president, and anyway, we have and multiple branches. So we cover the whole province, and wherever we don't cover by branches, we travel to.
Right, and the branches would be Vancouver, Surrey, Victoria, up in the Okanagan,
Vernon,
and also up as far north as Prince George.
Correct.
So,
Right.
and you do a lot of traveling.
I do a lot of travel, so I do a lot of Okanagan travel, so pretty
Right.
much you name the town, and I've been there anywhere in between, and also north.
Right, and
Prince
George, you also do a fair bit of traveling. You're back and forth to the island a fair amount, aren't you?
Yes, and tomorrow I'll be going to help a guy in Nanaimo, flying out specifically just for him, so because he's got a garnishee, and he's getting his income garnishee to the extent of 33% of what he's taking home.
Ouch.
And he can't live.
Right, right.
So we'll be flying out, signing him up, and getting rid of that garnishee.
But this whole notion, George, of mobility, of being in a position to, when called upon, take the business to the client, is a very different way of conducting business, particularly as a trustee, most of whom like to sit in their offices and wait for the parade to form outside.
Well, I come from experience, my predecessor firms and who I was associated with. We've traveled all the time. We used to be very strong up in Fort St. John. We traveled to Edmonton. We had an office in Edmonton at one time. And we've always traveled. Have ticket, will travel.
Well, and I think, though, Brett, that has turned out to be a very prudent approach to doing business.
Yeah, I think these days, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years, even major professions, even being a lawyer or an accountant or a trustee, you need to be accessible to your client.
Absolutely.
And to be accessible, you need to be prepared to go where they are, and very often they can't travel. You think of older people with mobility issues.
Sure.
People without motor vehicles, even in a major metropolitan center like Vancouver, there are people who are out in Maple Ridge, which is a substantial travel.
People in prison.
Right.
Seriously.
No kidding. People in prison. Fairly recently, I signed up an elderly gentleman in the hospital who was he's going to be there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and he needed to go bankrupt. So I went to go visit him in hospital and sat with him and spoke to him with his bed.
And you get rid of all the stress,
Yeah.
and his blood pressure goes down. I mean,
That's correct.
it works.
And it does. And of course, his family's sitting around, and they feel a lot more comfortable about the fact that Dad isn't under so much emotional pressure.
Well,
anymore.
exactly. Compounding the physical
The physical.
duress that he's already suffering.
Correct.
So have trustee will travel has proven to be quite a successful business model, George, right from the get-go.
Oh, yes. We if we don't have a branch, then we'll utilize the local executive offices and go there.
I wanted to talk to both of you. Now, we mentioned right off the beginning of the show, we're going to talk about debt solutions, and in many cases probably open a few eyes to possibilities that people perhaps didn't even know that were there in terms of resolving their debt issues. But before we do that, I'd like to canvass both of your opinions on this because, gentlemen, since the beginning of the new year, and it's only been a month, The playing field has changed. The governor of the Bank of Canada has seen fit to cut the overnight interest rate by 0.25% down to 0.75%. The dollar has taken a pounding, down almost a dime in just the past week or two. How do you see all of this, George? What did you make of it when this unexpected, to say the very least, interest rate cut was announced by the Bank of Canada? What do you think they're up to?
I'm not absolutely sure what they're up to, although I do note that Pollers, who's the president of the Bank of Canada, was also president of the Export-Import Bank, and his main thrust was to promote exports. Well, he's certainly done that by driving down the dollar, and the dollar's depreciated 25% since he's been in power.
Right.
And it's going to make our exports that much cheaper, for sure. But what's the effect on the average guy? Let's say that the banks had even processed this thing through to their variable rate mortgages. On a $300,000 mortgage, at 1% would have been $3,000 in the year. 0.25% is like $250.
Right.
It works out about $1 a day, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And its actual fact, it's less than that because because the banks are only giving over 15 basis points, which means there's probably about 50 cents a day.
Now, Mr. Polos, Brett, told us when he made this, again, very unexpected announcement, that it was all about stimulating the Canadian economy. Obviously, George's observations about our exports being considerably more attractively priced as a result of a depleted dollar, that's one consequence. But he was all about stimulating Canadian consumers. Well, you deal with a lot of Canadian consumers who are, to say the very least, overstimulated and in big trouble.
Well,
what's this going to shake out like?
On a practical level, you've got to think that, as an example, where is it actually going to affect someone on their bottom line, on their personal balance sheet?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're looking at things, it's not going to change your credit card rate. It's your retail cards. Potentially, if you right now are renewing your mortgage, maybe you can negotiate a slightly better rate with the bank.
Right.
Variable rates, obviously it'll affect that, but most people have bought themselves into some sort of fixed rate plan with the bank. So genuinely on the bottom line, probably going to make very little difference. And the banks themselves, in fact, have not, as George pointed out, moved it by the 0.25.
That's true.
That's true. Most of them have only gone the 0.15. And so for someone like me, as an example, I'm in a fixed rate plan, and it's going to make absolutely no difference.
Right.
If anything, I would say that the decline, in fact, George mentioned this earlier in our previous discussion, the decline in the oil prices, in fact, probably had far more to do about putting disposable expenditure in people's pockets than this is ever going to do.
Just the money, George, just to follow up on that, we're saving more money on gas than we're ever going to save by virtue of a tiny interest rate cut on our mortgage. So the savings on the gas, suppose now we used to fill up our vehicle and it cost us, when we were paying a $1.40 or whatever nonsensical number we were paying, it's supposed to cost us, for round numbers, $100 to fill up our vehicle. Well, nowadays it's going to cost us maybe $75. So now that balance, that $25 available cash that wasn't there last month, I don't see a lot of people assigning that to reducing debt. Well, it just becomes disposable spending money, doesn't
Absolutely. I mean, all that it'll do, in my opinion, is that it'll create that much more income for the consumer spending, or maybe even travel, etc. But it's not going to pay down debt. Debt, most people, I say most people, I mean, there are people that pay off their Visa, their MasterCard within the month, at the end of each month.
Right.
But they're few and far between.
True.
Most people, they don't even care about the interest. They look at the amount that they got to pay to keep those guys from phoning them.
Minimum payment, right?
Minimum payment. If it's $300, that's what and that's part of their budget. They don't care about the interest.
Right. Right. And suppose, though, I guess, Brett, what I am seeing, and this is why I'm curious, because some of this is going to negatively impact a lot of consumers and positively impact your business, because some of them are going to get into trouble. What I've seen is marketeers, particularly, seizing upon this interest cut to encourage us to get out there and buy even more stuff. And quite realtors, car dealers, I mean, it's quite a non-stop group. See, well, there's more money in your pockets. Let's get out there and spend it.
Well, look at Target. There's a classic example.
Right.
They just gone bankrupt, and they're offering all their stuff for sale now.
Right.
So everybody's going to be going in there, spending the money. They're not going to be, and they're probably going to be adding to their existing Visa and MasterCard balances. They're not going to be paying it down. So you have those opportunities now. Sony's just closing down all their stores.
Right, right.
Sure, adds some unemployment, but in the case of Target, they've got all their employees on for a minimum 4 months. And not only that, there's somebody coming in to take over those things. So the economy is working. The economy is flushing out the excess bad stuff. You know, sometimes we're likened to funeral directors, I guess, but...
Trustees, the funeral director.
Ah, I see.
I'd like to think of us as a ray of hope.
Well, I would
actually,
too, because, and especially given the kinds of conversations we have here on Boomer Life with you and both of you over the years, I would like to think there's more than just a little ray of hope too. I find that when we get into these conversations and really start talking about debt and how people get there and then how they can unravel themselves from it all, sometimes we come up, or you particularly come up, with solutions and suggestions that I know are causing people to go, really? I didn't know you could do that. For example, Brett, you've told us this many times. People come to your office. You're a trustee in bankruptcy. Some people come to your office and they are completely unraveled. They've had the harassing phone calls, the letters. They've been ignoring their financial obligations for far too long, and they are in seriously over their head. So they come and they sit down and they're all emotionally distraught, and they look you straight in the eye and go, well, we're here because I guess we have to go bankrupt.
Yes, I've you know, George will back me up on this. In fact, most trustees will know that many people walk into our offices thinking that bankruptcy is now the only alternative.
That's it. I'm out of options.
And in fact, that's not true. In many cases, there are other ways around it. In fact, just yesterday, I was speaking to a couple that hadn't sat down and done the sums. And in my opinion, and I know this might be something that they may not, you know, might be their first choice, but selling their property, selling their home had more than enough equity in it in order to pay off their debt.
Right.
And they were just a simple example. They were about to get shut off by BC Hydro. BC Hydro was threatening all sorts of legal action and potential disconnection on a $1,200 debt. And so this was incredibly stressful from their point of view. But just sitting down and looking at their financial situation, it's just very obvious to me that they would need to sell their home. And in fact, by doing that, they would be able to avoid bankruptcy, avoid a consumer proposal, which is one of the other alternatives.
Which we'll talk about at length in a bit.
Yeah. But in fact, when they phoned me, the lady, her conversation with me was exactly that. I need to go bankrupt. We need to go bankrupt. And then I said, well, hold on a minute. Let's sit. Let's talk about it. Let me figure some stuff out, and then I'll feed back to you. And at the end of that, in fact, I pointed out to them, no, you don't need to go bankrupt.
Is it, George, a fairly significant number of people who approach you and your colleagues at Abakhan and Associates convinced that they have to go bankrupt, who end up being really quite surprised that, no, that ultimate fate may not be mine after all?
I would say it's almost 80 or 90% of the people that come in.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, you got to go back a little bit. About 25 years ago, and Brett may not remember this, but 25 years ago, the predominance was bankruptcies. And gradually the federal government brought in more and more legislation and separated out what they call consumer proposals or consumer settlements. And now the preponderance of settlements or bankruptcies, if you like, or insolvencies is actually settlements by way of proposals to the creditors. So I think nationally it's about 45%. In our firm, it runs to about 65%. And we've had consistently about 65% of people that come in and we end up making a settlement with the creditors, a settlement offer, of which 98% of them will go through.
be accepted. Yes.
That's quite interesting. So already here we're talking something quite hopeful, because
It's a very low failure rate.
That's quite a high percentage of clients who come in who get pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, well, it's not a case of bait or switch, but it is a pleasant, as you say, a pleasant surprise. Oh, I didn't know we could do that.
Right.
Oh, really? Oh, can you afford $250 a month? You're paying $1,300 right now. Can you afford $250? Oh yeah, no problem with that.
You ask people how much they're paying right now just to stay afloat, stay at the same place.
Just those minimum numbers.
Numbers, and then you work out a proposal for them, and almost by and large, 100% of the time, what they could file in a successful consumer proposal is way below what they're currently right now paying.
Well, we need to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll dive right into the matter of the consumer proposal versus the bankruptcy, explore what they both are, and how a person may not have to go as bankrupt as they once thought they absolutely were going to be required to do. Our guests from Abakhan and Associates are George Abakhan and Brett Luckin, and they are online, by the way, at abakhan.com, and that is spelled ABAKHAN.com. Back with more on Boomer Life after this.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.